I'm Karan Munalingal. I head up the solution engineering team here at Itential. And today's session, I'm going to be covering, a lot of things about how we could leverage, how Itential enables a lot of our enterprise customers and folks out there to leverage a distributed source of truth and federate across that in order to derive and attain, comprehensive automation and orchestration. So this is a third leg, right, of the automation journey that we're going to talk about today. Is in addition to leveraging all the intelligence that the humans bring to the table, how do we also leverage all the data that is distributed across the enterprise ecosystem in every single technology that you adopt and kind of homogenize that and use that in a federated fashion instead of thinking about it from a single source of truth perspective, right? I think one of the NFD delegates mentioned that, hey, my data is all over the place. How do I leverage that in real time to drive some of these automations instead of just thinking about it as a, hey, I need a single source of truth to start somewhere, right? So we'll quickly get to this, right? So if you look at today's network change request process, right? All of us here and majority of the industry out there have been part of it, right? Have experienced it as a requester, just like Tom is seen over here, but also as a participant who is a domain expert who has to log into or write a script for on top of some of these technologies to help drive that fulfillment of that service that Tom is requesting, right? So when you do that handoff, and we all know, right, it's in order to provide some of these services in the network or in the cloud, the data has to come from somewhere. And most of the times, some of this data comes from ServiceNow, where Tom is providing some part of the information. Some of it comes from Infoblox, as an IPAM system. Some of it could be coming from an inventory system, but more often than not, it is also coming from network, right? Network can also be the source of the truth, your network devices, your VPCs, et cetera. So when you take a look at that and this particular diagram here, you also notice in today's world, in an orchestrated flow just like this, there's a lot of hands involved, right? So when a request comes through Tom, Ed might be doing the data gathering across these systems in his own fashion, whether it's manual or scripted. Then the information kind of flows to, Evan, who takes that information and deploys or runs a script. And then he's like, well, I'm done with my part. And then the next person takes over and start updating on the ancillary system to make sure that whatever happened in the network is now updated everywhere else. And finally, Tom gets a notification via email that his port is created and he can go about doing his own business, right? So it's there's a lot of handoffs here, and the problem statement here is, not only it introduced a lot of time for Tom to get the service that he's requesting, but also it potentially includes a lot of errors along the way, right? Someone might go to a stale system and pull out a bad IP and plug that into the script, and it doesn't work, and you have to retry again. And that's where you start getting the timeline around, hey, it's going to take us 3 days to give you a DNS or a port, right? So, because that is a problem statement, and we have talked to a lot of industry leaders as well as practitioners, because there's so much swivel chairing going on and some of these processes are manual and partially scripted, the thought process is, how am I going to solve this as an enterprise, as a practitioner? So now everyone is, kind of diverting their attention towards, hey, maybe I should start creating a single source of truth and it's going to make my life easy, right? Maybe I can shove everything into Netbox or another choice of tooling and then make it better, right? So from our perspective, right, the way that we see it, it's not only a very difficult task, and it has been for years, to kind of consolidate all the data across your entire network and ITSM system, but also it might not be a good idea at times, right? So instead of focusing on just generating and working off a source of truth and making that as a prerequisite to your automation initiatives, I'm going to talk about how Itential is helping enterprises leverage a distributed source of truth strategy and integrating into those real time in order to drive these automation end to end, as you see here, right? So talking about that, the key element, the recipe to success here in order to actually leverage a distributed source of truth is integration, right? Integrating into various different technologies that enterprise have today has not only been a challenge in the past, but it's still a challenge today. There's so much going on. Some have APIs, some don't have APIs, goes from programmable to non-programmable. So what Itential has done is we have commoditized the integration market. And as you can see, right? The goal is for us to be able to integrate and talk to all systems possible, and whether it's ITSM, CI/CD, DevOps, cloud APIs, SD-WAN, or even verification and discovery, right? Every one of these technology actually play a part in successful end-to-end network automation, right? And that's what we kind of harped on. We have made it very easy. And this is just a subset, what you see here. We have close to 180 of these pre-built integrations available for all of our customers to leverage. So they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They would rather just figure out what's in their ecosystem and start automating day one. So with that, this is, we looked at how the manual and the swivel chair process goes. So a network change request with Itential, works this way, where you'll notice there's a lot of emphasis on leveraging various different sources of truth in each domain. So when we talk about data gathering, right? So instead of Ed logging into Netbox or Ed logging into Infoblox, we can use the programmatic APIs and capture that information real time when the automation is executed, in order to drive the rest of the steps. Itential enables operations engineers to define that in a more robust fashion so they can get a lot of value out of it, before actually executing some of these changes in the network, whether it's a port change, VLAN change, et cetera. They get to bring their tribal knowledge in the pre-check and the post-check domains. And in the network change, right, Peter mentioned this, every practitioner has their best tool, right? They love to use that tool, and that's the best tool for them. That's great. Itential helps integrate with all of those and leverages that as a way to talk to your network elements, your cloud elements, in order to drive this automation and also incorporate your own strategy that you have started with. And finally, if you look at the last step around synchronizing and updating all the ancillary system, it becomes very critical. When you make that change in the network, you also want to make sure that all the ancillary systems are up to date. So instead of a human going into an Excel sheet and filling that out, or even logging into Netbox, now we can programmatically use the APIs in order to do that in an orchestrated fashion. And finally, the notification. It's very critical that, it's very common that, hey, I'll let you know when it's done. But now, because we can automate this, leveraging these various sources of truth and the integration capability, I can let Tom know what exactly is happening with his service every second, right? As well as all the participant as part of this end-to-end process. So, that's basically like the preface to the demonstration. So what I'm going to do next is dive into the demo and kind of show you the thought process around how do we leverage these integration within the Itential Automation Platform in order to drive these end-to-end use cases and orchestrated flows where you only involve humans when there is a fallout, right? Let the machine do the work of communicating across the board and driving that force and providing these automation in a faster fashion, in a more robust fashion, less error prone, as well as improving the customer experience for Tom specifically. So let me switch over to the platform.
Is this integration, is this an ecosystem that like you curate, or do we have the ability to tie into non-supported integrations, things that you aren't necessarily writing? Do you give your customers the ability to pull in data from other places? Because I can see value in CMDBs or other places like that, and even other automations tied to maybe finance systems or along those lines. So is this something that like we would have to reach out to you and say, hey, we want integration with this, or is this something that a customer could build on their own?
Excellent question. So in addition to the pre-built integrations that we already have on our website, we also have encouraged our customers to build some of these themselves. So there is actually a tool where you can plug in, usually the open API specs or Postman collection, as long as your vendors have some of these APIs available. And it literally takes less than 3 minutes to build one of these, right? So we also have kind of incorporated a way of dropping that in the platform without having to go through the code mechanism. So yes, we absolutely would love for our customers to self-build, because that's where you start getting that velocity to which we're trying to get to, right? No need to contact Itential. Let me build it myself and go. So now we're actually looking at the Itential Automation Platform. So I'm currently inside of the automation canvas within Auto Studio. You might have seen this in Rich's presentation and Peter's as well. So let's take a look at this flow, right? We talked a lot about integrating into various different sources of truth in order to drive this. But what I would like to do is quickly start off from the core, which is how we onboarded that script within the platform, right? Which is right here. I'm basically leveraging and building on top of it as a modular flow. So I still have the ability to run that script. I still have the pre-checks. I still have the validation capability. But what I'm doing now is instead of having Tom go and Ed go to 5 different systems to gather data, I am now connecting it to various of these systems that we called out initially, like ServiceNow, Jira, Netbox, et cetera, to fetch that information real time instead of someone typing that in a form, right? This is where you start getting a lot of value. And Jordan, to your point, as you figure out, hey, I would also like to go to this billing system or another CMDB system because that's where my data lies, we can quickly integrate into that. And that now becomes one of these boxes within the automation canvas, right? It's very real time. So as you figure out where the data lives today, you can start adopting that instead of saying, I need to consolidate. So let's take a look at it from top to bottom, a very similar flow to Rich's. There's going to be a form that Tom fills out. But in this time around, we're not going to ask Tom to fill out IP addresses and firewall information. All he's going to do is just fill out where he wants support from a location perspective and the description. And then we start integrating into ServiceNow using their APIs. So when I click on this particular automation, this is actually a modular automation. So by default, it will go and create a CR. It will go and create a Jira ticket in order to help address, keeping track of changes happening in the network, right? Tom requested a change. I want to make sure all the team members in the network know about it. And also Tom has visibility into it through Snow, right? So he can look at updates, et cetera. And then after that, we have notifications. So in this case, we are specifically integrating with MS Teams, but majority of the notification and collaboration tools out there have APIs. So a lot of our other customers leverage, Slack and Zendesk and some of the other tooling out there, PagerDuty, et cetera. And then a very critical step, because it's very aligned with this specific example, is as you notice, there's another pre-built automation. This is readily available. And Jordan, to your question, in addition to the integrations, Itential also provides some of these pre-built automations that you can use. These are just workflows that have been vetted, that have been created by our teams against these end systems that you can literally drop as a box. So think about it as a containerized flow that you can execute.
When you are building these steps, or you have this workflow, right?
Yep.
And one of them, for example, is an Ansible playbook.
Sure.
And you've got your gateway product.
Yep.
From looking at this workflow, can I click on the box that says run this playbook and it will take me to that playbook in gateway?
No. So good question. So what would happen is this is where you would reference that playbook, right? So someone will build the playbook and you will reference it and actually utilize Automation Gateway to execute. So when Peter mentioned Automation Gateway as the execution engine, somebody else who's not a playbook writer can reference that here as one of the actionable items against the network.
Right, but if I wanted to see what that playbook was, is there a direct link from this step directly to that playbook so I can investigate it, or do I have to go open a new tab and manually browse there?
Sure. Yeah. Currently, that's not a feature. But yes, you're asking for a reference to say, oh, this is a playbook. When I click on it, take me to the IAG that manages. Correct.
After one of these jobs has run,
yep.
Create a Jira ticket is one of your example steps in this workflow. Yep. Can I go look at a trace of that job that ran and have a link to my Jira ticket that got created?
Excellent. Yep. So great point. When I execute and run this automation, I will walk you through exactly where it leads to. You will get a notification. As a user, you will get appropriate links. Literally, when you click on that link, it takes you to the Jira ticket or the ServiceNow ticket.
Great. Thanks.
Absolutely. So, just kind of going down, as I mentioned, this is just one of the few examples where a lot of our customers will quickly integrate into their own inventory asset or IPAM asset and start pulling information to drive a change into the network, right? And as I continue scrolling down, you'll notice I've also added one of the other pieces, right? Connecting into info blocks. They have APIs. Connecting into, Palo Alto for security policy updates, or even a Cisco ASA device, which is in the network, right? So a lot of different customers have different vendor selections and technologies in their network. And our goal is to help you connect that so you can conform that to your standards. So that's what this example is all about. You'll notice after we make the change into the network, the last part is we close out all the change requests, we'll close the tickets and broadcast notification. And I've intentionally dropped a step here for rollback, right? It is a modular flow where it undoes what I just did, just in case fallouts happen. So customers do have the ability to define some of these as well. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kick off this automation. So let's click on play. And as you notice, right, I can directionally say this is associated with this group. So I think someone asked a previous question around RBAC. Within Itential Automation Platform, there's heavy importance on RBAC. So when you log in, you get to see certain applications. When you log in, you might get to see certain automations that you can change. But in the next section, which we'll discuss how it actually gets exposed to only certain users and certain machine-to-machine kind of interaction. So with that, I'll go ahead and kick this thing off. Let's go take a look at the instance of this automation while it's running. So the first step is, Tom comes in based on his role. He gets this very simple form. He picks up what the service location is and the port description. So in this case, he just provides a port description and then confirms. So as it starts moving through the automation, so if I quickly click on the visualize screen, this is what that looks like, right, for the operator if they want to check in on the flow. So right now it's on this particular step. It's validating the network change. But to your point early on, it has already gone through the change management piece. So if I now quickly click on the notification, you'll notice this is what you see. So this could be propagated to any teams. So I'm specifically using MS Teams here, but you could now do this on Slack or any other tool set that you want. You could email it to somebody. But I could very easily click on the snow ticket and actually takes me to the ticket and tells me what step it's on. I can do the same thing with, going back and clicking on the Jira ticket status, and it will take me to that, right? So if I go back to this project here, so this is the actual ticket, right? We actually captured the change that Tom wanted to do. And we actually went to Netbox in order to go fetch this IP. Tom never had to fill that out, right? So what we did is we actually leveraged programmatic APIs in order to go do that real time and still update the tickets as we kind of go through this entire motion. And this is all being done leveraging all the APIs. So now when I go back to the automation and kind of scroll through that, you'll notice all these boxes are pre-built automations. So customers can actually leverage that today and download them from our pre-built content. And as we kind of continue to go through same validation steps, it ran through the pre-check, and I will keep going, executed the script. And then finally, it's now updating security policies. Security teams sometimes have their own flow. So they might say, hey, look, I want to review the data before I push it through, right? Because that's, they want to make sure nothing bad goes into a secure network. So you'll notice they can come and check this thing out, reject, commit. I'll go ahead and commit and move on to the next step. So in short, right, when I go back to the automation, what's critical about this is, enterprise should focus on their existing set of data wherever they lie in multiple different systems. And they can use something like Itential in order to integrate across and help drive such an automation very rapidly, right? Instead of focusing on just creating a single inventory or source of truth, let's adopt the distributed source of truth because there are technologies that are going to own data, and we should leverage that right at the gate.